All right.
Coming to you live from the inaugural Rando Radio, reporting from Rusa Nation. As we celebrated the 115th anniversary of International Women's Day on March 8th, and as we celebrate Women's History Month, the month of March, we're so excited to begin this new part of Between Controls with an interactive panel discussion a few times a year. Today, we have some women in randonneering. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce each of them, and then we'll begin with some general questions and chit chat. The first person joining us is Terri Boykins, who resides in Los Angeles, California, and rides with the Pacific Coast Highway Randonneurs. Terri joined Randonneurs USA in 2011, achieved a K-Hound in 2024, a Mondale Award in 2025. Thank you, Terri, for being here with us today. The second person is Harriet Fell. Harriet Fell resides now in Oakland, California, and rides with the San Francisco Randonneurs. Harriet completed Paris-Brest-Paris in 1975. Harriet was one of the first American women to complete Paris-Brest-Paris and finished in 88 hours and 40 minutes. Thank you, Harriet, for being here with us this evening. For the third person I'd like to introduce is Melinda Lyons. Melinda resides in Boxford, Massachusetts, rides with the New England Randonneurs, and joined Randonneurs USA in 1995. Melinda has finished Paris-Brest-Paris 6 times.
Wow.
And also completed Montreal-Boston in 2001. Thank you, Melinda, for being here.
Thank you.
Our next participant is Emily O'Brien, who resides in Medford, Massachusetts, rides with the New England Randonneurs, and joined Randonneurs USA in 2006. Emily has completed an Ultra Flash Award, completed Montreal-Boston in 2006, and Paris-Brest-Paris in 2007. In addition, Emily is an esteemed author of last spring's The Rando Gender Gap in American Randonneur Journal. We're so glad to have you here today, Emily.
Thank you.
And the last participant is Pamela Wright. Pamela resides in Fort Worth, Texas, and rides with the Lone Star Randonneurs. She joined Randonneurs USA in 2006, has completed Paris-Brest-Paris 2 times. She has 3 times, my apologies, 3 times, and again, I believe has an Ultra K-Hound, which is, you have a total of 17 K-Hounds? Is that correct?
I think I'm on 19.
Oh my gosh, my apologies, 19.
Either 18
an Ultra
or 19.
R12. Yeah. Amazing. An Ultra R12. And one thing I wanted to also say, you're the first woman to achieve the 1200K 4-continent International Super Randonneur Award.
Well, the first American.
Okay.
I'm definitely not the first woman. One of my dearest friends is the first, and I'm the third.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, congratulations, and thank you for so much for being here today. We're so glad to have you, Pam. Okay, so we're kind of start with the first question, and it's very easy. I just wanted to go and start. We'll start with Terri. Terri, what brought you to cycling?
Well, I've pretty much been cycling my entire life, but as a kid, I grew up in San Francisco, California, and did a lot of riding, and they have a lot of hills there, so you really learned how to do hills pretty quickly. And then when I came to Los Angeles to go to college, you have to ride your bike to school because that's the only way you can get there and back. So after that, I started, had a few bikes stolen. We've all been through that in college. And then after that, I started riding with some friends, the California Triple Crown Double Century Circuit. So I'd been doing double centuries for a very long time. And at this point, I'm trying to just finish off one more and then I'm done with double centuries. But, I've been riding and cycling my entire life. I haven't done the really long ones, but I do kind of in the middle kinds of things, and enjoy it a lot. And I'm glad I'm in, with some amazing ladies who are doing some amazing things in cycling all over the place. So that's kind of how I got started. And then I went over to randonneuring after the double century kind of thing kind of started kind of crashing quite a bit. And I really enjoyed when we went to this permanence program where you didn't have to chase down the owner of a ride to ride it. That's been a game changer, at least for me, and I think for a lot of other folks, where you can really enjoy that part of randonneuring. So that's kind of how I've gotten going. And our RBA here at Pacific Coast Highway Randonneurs is Karen Huber. And you can't be a PCH randonneur with Karen unless you're going to learn to ride and do some tough, hard things. So all props to Karen Huber. So thank you.
Thank you, Terri. Harriet, what brought you to cycling and to the sport of randonneuring?
Okay, well, when I was 5 years old, and mind you, I have two sisters, so they didn't think of getting a bike in my family. I mean, three little girls back in the 40s and 50s, didn't need a bike. But a little boy who was the son of a good friend of my mother's lived down the block. And when he turned 7, he was 2 years older than me. He outgrew his first bike and she passed it to me. So my dad went out and got me riding, and I could only allowed to ride around the block, I think, till we moved when I was 12, on the sidewalk, around the block and around the block and around the block many, many times. But I was really lucky because my older sister, who's 4 years older than me, didn't get a bike for another 2 years. And she pleaded for one, and they got a secondhand bike when she was 11. So I was really lucky that I got one at 5 and, got riding. When in 1970, I moved to France to work with some mathematicians there, and I wanted a tour. I had friends who'd done AYH trips. I'd never done that. I'd never done an overnight. In high school, we did one 20-mile ride together and spent the whole day doing it. That was on my old clunker 1-speed. And, I bought a bike in Chartres, and I was given some panniers and a big handlebar bag, and I loaded them up with, I rode 20 kilometers the first day on the flat, 30 the next, and then I loaded up these bags and set out for the next youth hostel early the next morning. It was 103 kilometers away, and that was my first day touring. And it was just heaven. I got my first flat, and we had sew-up tires then, so I luckily had one spare sew-up tire, and I was panicked about what if I get a second flat? Do I have to sit here and sew my tire on the road? But I didn't get a second one. By the end of that first week, I did my first 100-mile day, and it took me till 9 o'clock at night. I was not fast, but I was thrilled. So that got me hooked. And then I kept touring mostly on my own. I did a couple of little trips with friends for a week, but in 1974, again, I moved to France to work with colleagues, and I wanted to join a club. And I was then staying just southwest of Paris in Bourg-sur-Yvette, and it was in a residence just opposite the university in Orsay. And I asked around how to find a cycling club. I'd seen plenty of clubs on the road that I rode with on my own on the weekends, whoever I caught up with. But I was told if I joined the University Athletic Association, they had a cycling section and they would hook me up with a club. So I did that, and they gave me a pile of Xerox copies of routes that had been hand drawn from Michelin Jaune, the yellow maps that are 1 centimeter to an inch. And they all started across the street from my apartment. I thought that was pretty perfect. And then, they were around 50 to 100 kilometers, that kind of range. And they started a half hour after dawn. So every month there was a different starting time, depending on when the sun rose. So most people could get to the start by daylight. And I was the only woman all year who showed up for any rides, but they were just delightful. What I didn't know is that was a year preceding a run of Paris-Brest-Paris. And so they were setting out There had been one club member who I didn't even meet because he wasn't riding with us all year. He was busy, who had done Paris-Brest-Paris before, and they all wanted to do it. So they were heading off to do these brevets, and they, said to me in April, we're going to ride a 200-kilometer ride outside of Paris, east of Paris. You should come. You can do that. It's no big deal. So that was my first official anything ride. And it was freezing rain. I went on it, but we made it. And then, okay, then they announced we're doing a 300-kilometer ride. And only we started from our starting place, was actually 200 miles, a little more than 300 kilometers. And we did it a week after everyone else because we were running our own rally the weekend they then planned the 300. So they let us do it a week later, and it was just our club. The winds were horrendous, and I think I didn't sleep that night because I could barely keep my eyes open. And it was hard for me because two of the riders were really slow, and we kept having to stop for them. And finally, they decided they would stop for dinner and told us to go on. And I'm not sure I would have made it otherwise. And we got there, made it. I was proud, and I hated it. It was not fun. And when it came to the 400, I couldn't do it because I had to be in England for a conference, so I didn't. And when I came back, they told me one of those guys who was so slow on the 400 actually on the 300, did the 400. And so surely I could do the 600. Oh, 600, 300 was terrible, but I did the 600. And I had lots of problems. You can read about them in the paper I wrote. And that's when I found out about Paris-Brest-Paris. It was only doing the 600-kilometer brevet. And one of the guys had asked the people running it if I could do Paris-Brest-Paris, even though I hadn't done the 400. And they said yes, because I was American. And at the time, there weren't any brevets for Americans. So if I thought I could, and no Americans had succeeded in doing it before, not just women. It was the first year. In fact, the year we did it, 8 started and 4 of us finished. And so that's how I got started.
Wow. What a wonderful story. Thank you, Harriet. And thanks for inspiring so many of us for you to be one of the first Americans and first women from the US very, very inspiring. Thank you for that. All right, Melinda, how did you get into cycling and how did you get into randonneering?
So I've always ridden my bike, even in high school through college. And then early in my post-college days, I stumbled into some pretty serious cyclists, including Warren Sass, who had done PvP in maybe 1975.
No, 9.
9, okay. Thank you, Harriet. And I thought this was normal, that people did these crazy rides. And I said, well, I got to do that. So I kind of got involved in what was then called the Boston Brevet Series before New England Randonneurs was going. And I just loved it. Always took me like 50 miles to get going. And then I always felt better after 50 miles. And then I was always very good at riding continuously and sometimes without sleep. And I ended up doing 6 PvPs. I was first female at twice, which was huge for me. It was really nice experience. But lately I'm older, so I don't. Orthopedic problems have kind of stopped me from doing such long rides, but I still really admire people that do it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Melinda, and congratulations on all those accolades and for inspiring all of us. So thank you so much for that and for paving the way for us as well. So, Emily, what brought you to cycling and to the sport of randonneering?
So probably a lot like Terri and maybe like Melinda, I grew up in the city. I grew up in DC, and I rode my bike for transportation, and I rode my bike to school in high school. It was the easiest way to get into downtown DC at rush hour and not have to rely on unreliable public transportation. And then I went to college, and all of a sudden, my freshman year, I lived in the dorm, and my classes were all right down the street. And I was like, well, I'm still riding my bike here, but it's only like a block. So, so I got to go find some more places to ride my bike. So that's probably when I started doing more longer rides. It was not just to get somewhere. When I was growing up, we did do a number of, my mom took us on a number of like short overnight trips. I don't think we did more than 50 miles in a day or something. But in college, I started just getting more interested in going more places and exploring more of Massachusetts. And I got my first road bike, and I started riding with what was then the Charles River Wheelmen, which is also familiar to Melinda and Harriet.
Right.
The first I ever heard of PBP was probably after a CRW ride, hearing Melinda and some other people talk about it at lunch, probably around 2003. And I didn't think about it that much at the time. I was still in college. But I did always like going on longer and longer rides. I was on the cycling team in college, and I would always want to go on longer rides, and nobody would go with me. They would always be like, well, you're crazy. You're on your own for that. So the first few times I did like a 400K distance or something like that was by myself. I would just go out and turn around when I either got to Provincetown or got to the point when I felt like it was time to turn around. If you get to the end of Provincetown, you're out of Cape. So at that point, you have to turn around. So then I was my first long distance event actually was the Furnace Creek 508, which I read about there being a fixed gear division. And I thought, well, that's really cool. I want to do that. And so that was my first thing. That was 2005. And at that point, I had gotten together with my now partner, Jake, and we started doing the Boston Brevet Series together in 2006 and did BMB that year, and PBP the next year. And we've been enjoying ourselves ever since. It was actually a fairly long time before I ever did a single brevet on a bike that was not a fixed gear. And I think I've done one 400 on a geared bike. I've done a bunch of 2s and 3s at this point. I have yet to do a 600 on a geared bike.
Wow.
Maybe I'll try that at some point.
By the way, Emily completed BMB in 1 year on a fixed gear, which I don't think has been done before.
There were actually 3 of us that year.
Okay.
Well, that was Spencer Klassen and another guy whose name I can't remember. There were 3 fixed gears finished within a fairly short window. And when we first started, it was sort of much more the height of the fixed gear fad. And there would be a number of other fixed gear riders on the Boston Brevet Series rides. It was not uncommon for there to be 3 or 4 or 5. And then the fad ended, and then there would be one. But Spencer still does brevets on fixed gear, so
Yeah.
it's not just me.
Yeah. And didn't you say that you just celebrated your 20th anniversary in Randonneuring? Is that correct?
Yeah, this year would be my 20th Russoversary.
All right. Well, that's the kind of thing that's fun. Yeah.
Sure, why not?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. And thanks for sharing that, Emily. And Pam, what kind of brought you to cycling, and what brought you to our wonderful community in Randonneurs, USA?
Well, similar to all the other ladies, or most of the ladies, it was a part of my life, my whole life. It was the only way I could get out to go see my horse. It was the only way I could get to go, see my friends. It was the only way I could get to where I wanted to go. And even when I got a car, it seemed like my car spent more time in the driveway, and I'd have to still ride my bike to work at McDonald's. So the bicycle's always been part of my life. And then when I got serious into horses, I kind of gave it up for a long time, but realized that the bicycle I could do at a much higher level than I could my horses. And I came back, full steam. My best friend was doing bicycles, and so we just started hitting the road constantly. And my trip to Rando was from a guy that some people may have heard of called Dan Driscoll. And so Daniel is the one that we were both single at the time, apparently, and I had a bunch of friends at my local club saying, there's this guy, he rides bikes, there's this guy, I had like 6 or 7 people, nobody would say his name. And then finally we met at a party, and everybody called and said, that's the guy I was telling you about. So it's really his fault. And like Emily, I think my Rusa anniversary was last year. I think I was 20 last year with Rusa, and so this will be 21. And it's been a blast. I'd heard words. I didn't know it was randonneuring, but I'd heard the word, randonneur. I'd heard the words 200K. I'd heard the words RAM, PBP from another rando, Debbie Bro, who's done RAM and PBP, and so people in our club, and when I finally quizzed them about it, because I'd only ever seen 100K and 100 miles on the little weekend rides that we would do, and I thought they were really, I used lots of profanity and got mad at them because I thought they were just making stuff up. And I'm like, you know what? I know I'm new to the club, but come on, at least let me play. And then when I met Dan, and I still thought it was made up because he thought he was going to have 30 people on New Year's Day for a 200K. And nobody does that. Nobody can ride in the cold. Nobody can ride in the dark. Nobody's going to sacrifice New Year's Eve for a brevet. No, just nobody. And we had that many people. We had at least 30 people for that New Year's Day brevet. And I thought, holy shit, what am I in? And I've got a really competitive spirit with myself, not necessarily with others, but I'm very competitive with myself. And so for me, randonneuring, and I don't want to go too deep too fast, but it has become my metaphor for life. I wasn't really raised to be competitive. I wasn't really raised to fight the world. I wasn't raised to do that. I was kind of like raised to, well, if it's too hard, just to stop. And Rando, I finally learned how to laugh at myself. At your darkest moments, it's when somebody, if they can make me laugh, it just turns the tide for me. And I learned that you don't have to quit when things get hard, because I didn't know any other way. My family doesn't do that. And so when I learned that you don't have to stop, you can just adjust. You can sleep, you can eat, you can drink, you can slow down, you can turn a corner, whatever you want to do. But Rando, it kind of became a lifestyle only because I finally found, I don't know, the picture that I wanted to draw from myself. And so Rando has been great for my spirit. It's taught me a lot. Women like you, Melinda and Harriet, when I first went to PBP in 2007, I was devouring, all of the reading that I could find on women and PBP. And so thank you, because Dawn has said it, that you've just really encouraged and given us a role model to look for, but you really have been a pave maker for me. Just thank you, because it's been quite a ride.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you. That was very special. Thank you for sharing that. And it is interesting how it just mirrors life and how it teaches you so many things on the bike and off the bike. So,
yeah.
Dawn, you want to tell your story?
Yeah.
Dawn?
Your turn.
So the next question I wanted to ask you guys, women in randonneuring represent 16% of our total membership. And I wanted to get your thoughts on a few things you think might be important to encourage and grow more women in randonneuring. So I wanted to just open it up to the group, and if someone wanted to start, and maybe since you just finished, Pam, want to start us off on just sharing some things that you think that you saw that kind of helped you, and things that we can share with our community?
One, I think that the women that do come into Rando are extraordinary. My experience has been, as I've traveled more, that the actual people, the women that show up, are more like 6 and 7%. Starting with my first PVP, and then even then some, it's not uncommon for me to be the only woman, and I'm sure that the rest of you have had this too, where you're the only woman in that group. It doesn't make me feel awkward. I come from, yeah, especially you from racing. I come from a world of horses, and so I'm used to being the odd woman out, so it doesn't discourage me. But it was hard. It was, I didn't know any different in cycling or in horses. And so to find women that, you know, when I would start researching and start digging and find stories like Harriet, stories like Melinda's, it was so inspiring and so motivating. And some things that I've told other RBAs, people will ask, you know, how do we get more women in our club? And for me, I feel like it's really actually very easy. You have to make it fun. You have to make them feel welcome. You have to make it accessible, because lots of women have got families at home. I'm one that doesn't. But it's a very selfish sport, especially time-wise. And so if you can make a woman feel really welcome, and one thing that, you know, much as, you know, there's all different sides to Dan, but one thing he does better than anyone I've ever seen is mentor a new rider, whether it's man or woman, and make them feel welcome. He will not leave their side, you know, until they've crossed the finish line. Somebody said the other day, Dan will do everything but ride the bike for you. And so for me, when I hear RBA say we can't get women, and then when I tell them, all you got to do is ride with them, have fun.
Yeah.
It's not just a contest. They're like, oh, no, that's a lot of work. So for me, that it boiled down to very simple. I was made to feel welcome. It was enjoyable. I had someone mentoring me. I've been able to give back and mentor others. And I seek out those people now, you know, when I travel, and I get to seek out women like all of you when I get to travel to other brevets. So I don't think there's any magic sauce.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is Terri again. I had a thought on this. I'm glad you brought this issue up. I wasn't, when I saw it was like 16%, I was like shocked, because that's you know, you put a number to something that I think we've been looking at, that we've been noticing. I remember, I think 2 years ago when we had our International Women's Day, we had such a turnout of women. It was phenomenal. And the ride was, you know, it was a pop. So the ride was such that women felt that they could finish it and also enjoy it. And it wasn't, you know, way over the top. And most of the people who participated in that were actually new to randonneuring. Now, the other piece of it, though, is that we haven't seen too many of them since in some of our other events. And I do feel like at times I like the mentoring piece, and also making sure that, you know, sometimes you got to ride slower to help someone else, because it isn't all about you all the time. And I think what we get is, it does feel more of at times a very traditionally male sport. And what happens is then the testosterone starts spewing, and then, you know, we're too slow for them, or whatever. They don't want to wait for us, or whatever the deal is. And that's not all good. And I think if the mentoring and assisting women to be successful in this, then we could have more. But it's all of our responsibility, and yet it's all our fault as well, because I see a lot of women out riding everywhere. I think we all do. And I'm sure that they would be interested in riding, you know, some of the events that we have. There's very few people, very few women out there who've actually even done a century. A century to them is sometimes, I talk to a lot of them, they feel like that's a lifetime goal. It's just to finish a century. And then, we have all these super randonneur events, but things like that, I think, would be really, really helpful. Like when we have our events, we have 2 or 3 women show up. And a lot of times, it's just 1 or 2. And that's unfortunate. And I wish there was more because I think the camaraderie could really do something for this sport. And a lot of women would benefit from it, and young girls as well, because you have to bring folks along. Otherwise, it kind of fades away.
Yeah, very, very good points, Terri. Yep.
So one thing that I've talked to about with a number of people, in addition to that is, and this was something when I wrote that article last year, I had a long phone conversation with the president of CRW, and CRW had been doing, and I think a number of other cycling groups around here had been doing a fair amount of projects and sort of soul searching, and discussion about how to help the overall club population become more diverse and more of a reflection of the demographics of this region overall. And one of the points that he made is if you want to attract a certain group of people, then you need to go where they are. So I think that is whether you're trying to attract more riders of color or more women riders or whatever it is, there are groups and events and organizations that have more of them than we do. And I think in this case, maybe gravel events and some of the club centuries might be a good place to find the women who actually have the fitness and the capability to do randonneuring rides right now and could wake up tomorrow and finish a 300K and be fine. And they don't know about us, or they, and I think in a big case, there's that. I think the other thing, I've heard this from a lot of people who have gotten really into gravel as gravel has gotten more popular, is gravel events are largely on roads or trails that don't have cars or have very few cars. And I think a big challenge in getting some of the gravel riders to switch to randonneuring, which is mostly a road riding, is the cars. So I think we can help that by emphasizing that we do look for safe routes as much as we can. I think there are a lot of things that people don't necessarily realize about it too, especially with regards to night riding, for example, that you think it's kind of intimidating to think about riding at night, especially if you might be alone and you think this is a hard case to make to women riders in particular. And my own experience has been that a lot of, there are more drunk drivers at night, but there are so fewer drivers overall that riding at night is actually really lovely. And I would happily ride at night in places that I wouldn't go near during the day. And I feel like in a lot of cases, darkness is also kind of anonymizing. If you're riding at night, nobody can tell what gender you are because all you are is a bunch of lights and reflective stuff in the distance. And it's like, what's this weirdo doing on a bike? And that's that. And then they're gone. So in that way, I think we could probably do more to make that case. I think the team rides are a really great opportunity to bring people along because that's something where the rules say that you have to ride as a group. And if somebody is worried about doing something overnight or something longer than they've done before and being stuck alone, well, if it's a team event, you can't be stuck alone. And I've done a number of fleshes with people who are on their first overnight ride and who were kind of nervous about that. And then the sun goes down and the wind dies down and it's quiet and it's fragrant and the traffic is gone. And they're like, wow, this is amazing. This is the best kept secret. And they probably wouldn't have done it otherwise.
And same with the ruler rides. The ruler rides are a big you know, great thing to have in our tool bucket, if you will. And we've gotten lots of new riders who'll come out for some of those. But it's also nice to keep people that are aging out, if you will, or even in my case, healthing out. And so if you can kind of keep them as long as you can, I love all the new opportunities that RUSA keeps creating.
Yeah. There's on the same point, the Chicago Randonneurs have a member who the last 2 years was contacting because Chicago Randonneurs is a 3-year or 2-year region, so a newer region, but actually asking all the women that came out for rides and doing a survey and talking to them, and then having 3 different meet and greets. So people knew, like, if you're scared about riding alone, this is what we're going to do to help you. So kind of like what you were talking about, Pam and Emily, is to try to create this community within a community to help each other out and bring people along, and see where people are at, meet them where they're at, as you guys talked about. So very valid points.
I think it's also worth noting too, that it's great to make sure that it's possible to ensure that somebody isn't riding alone if they don't want to be, but also respect that some people are perfectly happy to ride alone and don't like the idea that somebody is slowing down to hang in with them if they don't need it. And I do know of a couple of other women riders, one of whom is even an RBA, who said, like, I don't mind riding by myself and I want to go my own speed, and I don't like to think that somebody is going a different pace because of me, and I will feel self-conscious about my pace if they do that.
Yeah.
So I think it is also important to say, some people really need the company, some people really need their space to be respected.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
you're totally right. I've only ridden long rides on my own for decades now, and that way I get to go at my own pace, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I'm slowing anyone down.
Right. As they say, ride your own ride, right?
Right.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Speaking of gears, and I wanted to start, and I actually wanted to start with you, Harriet, and then I'll ask Melinda. As far as how cycling has changed from when you started, but then gear, I'm thinking of gear and bike equipment and lights and things like that. What have you seen as far as, and I'll open up to everyone, gear changes and improvements that have made things better or not so better, or things we should focus on? So I'll start with you, Harriet, and then I'll turn the floor over to Melinda.
I still have the bike. I rode Paris-Brest-Paris on it. It's on my trainer now, though I use it in my living room. And it's totally roadworthy. I mean, it was 531 tubing, was, a good bike. Yes, my titanium bike's somewhat lighter. I have electronic shifters now, and for my old arthritic hands, I love them. Because, I do have arthritis pretty much everywhere, but that really helps. And you're very quickly in the gear you want to be in. You don't have to think about it in advance and do anything to get there. A lot of the equipment that goes on the bike is much lighter and small front bags. I mean, we used to these giant front bags. I mean, that's why I could carry a chicken in my bag. The clothing, I mean, my clothing, we had wool shorts. You could only get wool clothing. I mean, they didn't have any of the synthetics we wear now. So you got wool shorts, and the chamois in them was chamois, that is mountain goat skin. That's what chamois is. It was pieces, of chamois sewn together, and that's how they made the padding in them. And they took 3 days to dry. So, when I toured in them, I had to tie them on the back of the bike after I washed them and let them dry for a day or two. So, that was different. And then the jerseys only came in solid colors. They were wool jerseys. That's what we wore all year round. My club wore red wool jerseys. And, each club, you could tell by a different color. That was it. And so it's I must admit, I really like the synthetics we wear these days. And I like the fact that they dry quickly and that they're actually much more comfy on.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. How about you, Melinda? Any thoughts on things that you recognize or things you'd like to share from your perspective?
So when I started first randonneuring or cycling, there was obviously no GPS, etc. So every night before a brevet, I would sit there and cut out my route sheets and I would put them together in order, and we'd have them on our front of our bikes, and we'd follow the cues throughout the state. And Massachusetts doesn't have great signage, so it's always a mystery where you are in Massachusetts or New Hampshire, Vermont, where we used to ride. And now people would be lost without their GPS. They would just die with it, didn't have a GPS. So it's a lot different than it used to be, but it was fun. We I think we tended to group together more because there was some navigation problems. I went to Ireland for a 1200K once, and we had problems with navigation, and everybody kind of like glommed together, and we were like a group because we couldn't figure out where we were. So it was a little more friendly, I think, then with the navigation.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Anyone else wanted to share any thoughts about gear improvements or things they'd like to see improved out there? Anyone?
I think one thing about the GPS thing too is that at least in this region, the way that we create routes is really different. Like now we have much more circuitous routes that take a lot more side roads that are a lot more pleasant to ride on, whereas they used to be much more geared towards like staying on a numbered road for longer so that it would be easier to navigate. And now I think as a result of not having to, expect 6-page cue sheets for a 100K ride, the routes are actually much nicer too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of miss that. I agree a lot with Melinda that I think we worked more as a group. And when I started with Rando, that was my designated function, was navigator. So I had a purpose. And so I wasn't always, I wasn't always the fastest, the strongest and all that. But they all wanted to stay with me because I did all the thinking. And I kind of miss playing those mind games. I kind of wish that the newer randos could experience some of the mind games that you have to go through to make this more than just pedaling. I enjoyed all that. I agree with everything you said about the bikes, and I do love my electronic shifting now. I finally shifted over I finally switched after almost 20 years.
Agreed, Pam. And there was a time when I knew all the routes in New England like the back of my hand, and people would stay with me just because I knew I knew the route.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing else, not my speed or anything, but I knew the roads. So.
Oh, I don't know. I know a couple of those names that you ride with, so I know the speed is right there. But yeah, I miss that camaraderie.
It's interesting. I know myself, when I started Rando, I had a very basic bike computer, and I used cue sheets for a while. And to this day, even though I have a bike computer, on the longer rides, I always have my cue sheet, and people I've ridden with have commented, and they see this and they're like, I said, there's a sense for me of satisfaction of having the cue sheet again, because the computer could die, but then turning that piece of paper over when I get to a control. There's satisfaction in that paper that you don't get that from a computer. And so it's just a part of how my regimen, how I feel good on the bike. It's part of the piece of my feng shui on the bike or whatever you should say. But yeah.
Agreed.
I used to love having the map
You can look at the
on
whole
my
next 100
handlebar
miles.
bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe in redundancy. So, like you said, computer plus cue sheet, and I to this day, unless I really know the route, I always print up a cue sheet, and I save them, but I print one up because I like to have one with me just in case, because Garmin doesn't always, cooperate.
Right.
And I'm also old school with, manual shifting. I have not gone electronic, any of that. And I only have disc brakes on my mountain bike. So I'm a brake pad, that's just where I'm at these days. So, anyway, I think, it's always we're now, I think we're up to 13 speeds now, up to. And I think when I started riding, we were probably 5 and 7 speeds kind of thing. Other than the fixed gear folks, but I don't think they'll be able to get a 14th speed cog on any of these bikes anymore. But who
You have to
knows?
make the back end wider too.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Yeah.
really funny. Last year we had a part dirt, like I mean, I guess nowadays it's called mixed terrain in Vermont at 200K. That we used to just call it a Vermont 200K because Vermont has dirt roads in it. But now that gravel is popular, it's a mixed terrain 200K. And it's basically a route that we've run a bunch of times before. And I was on my normal fixed gear, which I tend to gravitate towards, especially in the early season when I'm feeling out of shape, because it's my comfort zone. And I'm sort of used to people finding it notable that I'm riding a fixed gear on something like that. But what was really funny last year is there was a couple of people in a group that I was riding with who just could not believe that I was doing this ride with rim brakes. And
Yeah.
of course, we've been running this route for long enough that it would have been, we haven't run this particular route for that long, but when we started running it, it would have definitely been a minority of riders that had disc brakes. Yeah. And the route hasn't changed very much, very much. So, it's sand, it's dirt roads, and it's early season, and it was raining. But, you squeeze the levers and the bike slows down. It's not... It's not that big a deal, but there were a number of people in this group who were pretty strong and experienced cyclists. They knew what they were doing, who basically had never owned a bike with rim brakes unless maybe they did when they were kids.
Yeah. Well, that's why we call it randonneering the big tent of cycling, because any bike works, right? Bring what you got, single speed, fat bike, mountain bike, road bike, fixie, things like that. So
elliptical, I've seen someone on an elliptical doing them. So it's amazing.
We had somebody do a couple of hours on an elliptical.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think we only had one come out and do one with us.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna just kind of tie things up here at the very end, and I wanted to just do a round table, and if there's any closing thoughts you wanted to share to Rusa Nation and to women out there in cycling, women and girls who are, as Terri pointed out, we have to bring girls in because girls are the future of women in randonneering. And so, if you have any words, pearls of wisdom. I'll go ahead and Terri, why don't you start us off?
Well, I thank you for inviting me to this gathering. It's been extremely helpful for me and educational and informing and just amazing, because I know folks have done amazing things on two wheels. So I'm so glad to be part of that. I just think that randonneering is still evolving, and what I like. What I've seen of it in the last couple years is a willingness to actually evolve, and with new policies and rules and ways of doing things, and not doing things because we've always done them that way. And on some of the rides this year, I've been able to meet some very young and youthful and newer riders, like Charlie Martin out here. He's just an amazing young man for the future of randonneering. The one thing that we've got to work on, I figure out a way to work on, is the women issue, like the after dark issue, because otherwise you're not going to be able to really ride through a whole series. And I'm thinking real quickly. We put on a 600K last year, and one of the women who was riding it, she needed it for her series, and didn't want to ride by herself in the dark, kind of thing. So actually, her dad came and met her at each control, so that she could have a chance of finishing it, because she would be riding in the dark. And I was thinking, I don't know how we can do, but we must do better. We've got to have a way to support women and young women to do these rides and to get involved. Otherwise, they won't. They just won't. So I think that's just something we can all work on. And, I'd like to help us work on that, us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Terri. Harriet, any closing words from you?
Oh, I'm glad to still be writing. I enjoyed meeting these women on International Women's Day. It's the first time I rode with other women on International Women's Day, and it was the San Francisco Randonneurs. And now a few of them actually live on my side of the bay, and we're going to try riding together.
Beautiful.
I wish I were up to doing more. I hope to get in another few centuries and even 200 Ks once I finish healing. More than that, I really can't ride at night anymore. And I agree, it's hard on younger people, but it's easier for them than it is for us old people. So my eyes just really aren't up to the nights anymore. So I can't do anything about escorting people at night. But I do ride with some people out in Oakland. But we're all retirees. Nobody else. I mean, I'm the oldest, but they're all pretty on in years. So I really don't know out here what I can do to encourage younger people. I mean, my granddaughter's just turned 4 and she's been riding a two-wheeler since she turned 2 with no training wheels. And she now goes out to a BMX course regularly and rides around the BMX course. And really, her birthday was last week. She turned 4. So yes, wow. I will encourage that one.
Thanks, Harriet. Melinda, any closing thoughts from your end?
So I don't do a lot of long rides anymore, but every year I run a 100K for New England Randonneurs out in Massachusetts. And what I really like about it is it's accessible. It's on a train station near Boston, and we get closer to 50% women than any other rides on the circuit. And I'm really proud of them coming out and doing the ride. And I feel like they're getting their toes into the event. And I really enjoyed doing that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Emily.
I think a big thing that I would want to say to anybody who's interested in dipping a toe in more than you have is one thing that always meant a lot to me about randonneuring is that I always felt really welcome and I always felt like I belonged. And I always felt the sense that if you're on the ride and you showed up, then everybody just assumes that it must mean that you know what you're doing. And I particularly appreciated that when I was a 20-something and going on club cycling events or any other cycling event where a whole lot of the people there could have been my parents. And then combine that with, a lot of us put on a helmet and a helmet look 10 years younger. When I was doing PBP, I had all these people asking me where my parents were. And on the last day, I got passed by a peloton of like juniors and they went one way and I went the other way and their chaperone chased me down because they thought I was supposed to be with their group. But that aside, I always really, really felt welcome. And I always felt like if I'm there, everybody assumes that I should be there. And that always meant a lot to me. When I was in grad school, I spent 2 years in Germany and I did brevets there too. And the percentage of women there was even lower, but I had the same experience where people just kind of act like if you're there, then you belong there. And so I have always really, really appreciated that. And that's my favorite things about randonneuring.
Yeah, I agree. Very, very good points. Very good. All right, Pam, closing thoughts from you?
I just want to say ditto to what everybody else has said. Piggybacking even just starting with Emily, I feel the opposite though. I think I want to get the message out that even if you have been doing this as long as the group on this panel has been doing it, I still show up sometimes feeling like I'm a brand new rando. I still feel sometimes like it's like, has it really been 20 years, and do I really have all this behind me? Because I still feel like a new person. And so when I try to ride, one thing I try so hard to do, and they tease me about being Miss Manners, and that's not always a good teasing, but I try to always be just a good cycling ambassador. And I think that goes with, with the cars that are coming at you and passing you. I think it's the people that you encounter at the stores. If you're lucky enough to get to wave at a little girl on the road, if you're lucky enough to see a little girl on a bicycle and tell her how beautiful her bicycle is, just those things of just being, I want drivers and other people to see us as humans, as somebody's, sister, daughter, mother, and not just as a cyclist with a helmet. So I really want to try to be that person that Terri has really done a really good job of talking about. It's up to all of us. Mm-hmm. It's up to all of us to be that mentor. It's up to all of us to slow down for a minute. And sometimes we're all guilty of, I know I am. It's like, man, I got to get home because I got to do so-and-so. Or the opposite. Okay, my body has shut down. I had to stop and y'all need to leave me alone. And so we all kind of have to, how do we benefit each other, out there on the road, because we're all we got. And then I wanted to say something about what Melinda talked about on percentages. If you ever want to come ride and be welcomed as a woman, Lone Star has a typical 50-50% male-female. And beautiful. So until like just the last year or two, it was traditionally 50-50. If not, there was lots of times where we'd have more women than men. And now we don't, our group has gotten smaller over the years. We're all starting to age and to have health issues. But we've tried to welcome everybody. And one of the things that Dan has done a good job at, I haven't, and that is reaching out like to the local triathlon clubs. Those people are looking to do Ironman. They're looking for century training. They're looking for 200K training. And so that was one of his big things, is to actually reach out and go ride with other clubs. And so I could still go ride with my local club and probably kind of get some more recruiting. So Terri's kind of got me thinking again about how much more active I could and maybe should be.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for letting me, meet these women. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you, ladies. It's been a joy to have you all here tonight and part of our first Rando Radio and sharing each of you and your perspectives with Rusa Nation. So thank you for being here. Be the change you wish to see in the world, right? All of us outstretch that hand, take someone, help them with a problem on their bike, just give a smile. That's what we're here to do. So thank you so much. And thanks for being here. Yeah.
Are we allowed to stay on for a minute after you stop recording?
Sure. Everyone do your, we'll end with a good power pose or something. Ready? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Peace out. All right. Thank you.